It's a really great pleasure to introduce Victor Calise, who is the Commissioner of New York Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. I think that, that the work that Victor is doing is really amazing, and I think that it's particularly pertinent right now because of all of the stuff going on around COVID-19 and the fact that the work of Victor's team is continuing during this outbreak, which is affecting New York particularly. So thank you so much for taking the time out from your busy schedule, Victor. It's really great to have you with us.
Well, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, perfect. So thank you, Neil. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to participate today. And we are in the epicenter of everything happening in America right now, and over 15,000 deaths. And we are really trying to ensure that everything the city does includes people with disabilities. So everything from our NYC Get Food program to everything with making sure protective equipment is distributed to people with disabilities and their healthcare workers and personal care attendants that come to their aid every day. And so we don't flood the hospital and we don't expose people with disabilities to this. We've looked at transportation options and streamlined those so people can get from point A to point B and get to those necessary appointments. And it's challenging. And we're looking to leverage accessibility and the digital accessibility during COVID. So to understand New York City and its enormity, we really have to understand the people that live here. And we are a city of 8.5 million people. And if we break down disability, I have a statistic chart up right now that talks about the people and the number of people with disabilities that live here. 11% of the population are disabled, with 553,000 are ambulatory disabilities, 335,000 are people with cognitive disabilities, over 200,000 are people with visual disabilities, and close to 189,000 are people with hearing disabilities. So that's who we have to take care of every day. And when the city is up and running, we also have about 9 million people with disabilities that come visit the city every year. So during this pandemic, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we have accessible communication. I have two slides up here. One is accessible press conferences. There have been some leaders in our country that have not provided accessible communications during their press conferences. We've done this right off the bat because we learned this during Superstorm Sandy, that we needed to have sign language interpreters available, that we needed to have captioning available. And there also is a release after the mayor's press conferences that people can read. So the formats are there for accessibility. We continue to think about what accessible press conferences look like, and right now are developing guidelines that we're putting together for our effective communications and accessible communications during press conferences. So we continue to do that, and I'll talk more about. Here we go. Getting to the other slide that I have there too. Just move this around. Is social media. We make sure that our Facebook accounts are accessible, that we're looking at Twitter, making sure that all text is available, making sure that the videos that we have out are audio described when we see them, or making sure that they have captioning. It's really important for us to put accessible communications together in our social media platforms. Prior to this, we've also held trainings for our digital communication teams across all of city agencies. And we have over 50 city agencies that we communicate with regularly to ensure that this social media is accessible. Our websites, right? A given is accessible websites, and the slide I have up here is talking about our accessible websites. Right away, we understood that if we don't have all of this information of what's happening around New York City in one location for people with disabilities, we would have an issue. And right away, we put up a COVID-19 webpage, and you can go to nyc.gov/coronavirus, disabilities-coronavirus, or I think I got that wrong. I'll post it. And we make sure that we have PDF fact sheets and guidance. Our food delivery, we are delivering millions and millions of meals, and we have to make sure that people have accessible formats to call for that ordering. And we've made sure that that was accessible right off the bat, so people with disabilities can access the food that they need. Virtual accessibility resources. It was important for us, sorry about that, a copy of a web page that's up there now, and I keep clicking over it. Sorry about that. About what does virtual accessibility look like? What do virtual meetings look like? A lot of city agencies that are hosting these virtual meetings aren't putting accessibility together. So we were like, we have to put out guidance. It's really important for us. So we put out some guidance. People can access those on our website as well. And you're able to figure out what a virtual accessible meeting looks like with sign language, how to look at different platforms such as Zoom, such as WebEx, such as Google Meets, Microsoft Teams, and ensure that accessibility in each of those platforms are looked at. We've released this. You can look at it yourself. I know that it's being used in Australia. Cities around New York City, cities around America are adopting these guidelines to their cities. Really important for us to get it out, free, easy to get to, really digestible. So we're excited to be able to lead what virtual accessibility looks like. Virtual activities guide. We know people are at home, and people with disabilities, known for some time, online access is the best thing. But what do I do now? What do I do now that I can't do things, or I can't get out and get the things? We put online workshops and conferences. We have verbal descriptions for museum tours. Some of the great museums, such as the Whitney, that are here, or the Museum of Modern Art. So we want to make sure that we're driving people to be able to see the inside of museums while they're home. We have performances and events, and which disabled organizations are putting together with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, put together to work out for fitness programs at home. So working across our agencies, working across our nonprofit partners to make sure that we can certainly be able to drive performances and events. And we have something called Real Abilities Film Festival that was started here in New York and has branched out around the world, and they've moved to a virtual platform, which is to be able to give people these film festivals that are specifically for disability in a virtual platform. So these are all things that we have listed on our website. It's easy to get to. We have, if we're looking, slide I have up here is a slide of tablets and remote learning with our Department of Education. We have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, education department in all of America with 1 million kids, and 250,000 of them identify as having an individual education plan, which means they need some type of assistance. So we, right off the bat, started working with our Department of Education, making sure that we can get them some of the most important things like their one-to-one nursing at home, making sure that we supported and ensuring that their platforms that they're teaching on are accessible, and not only for the students, but also for the teachers with the disabilities, teachers with vision disabilities that weren't getting the access, and working across the Department of Education's special education programs, making sure they were working across their digital programs, making sure that kids with disabilities that don't have the means can get iPads, can get tablets, can get Wi-Fi. And we've been targeting these groups, not only in the Department of Education, but kids with disabilities that are are outside of the Department of Education, because there's a lot of people with disabilities that live in poverty in the city of New York, and families don't have access to these resources. And we understood that, and making sure we can get these kids the opportunities so they can participate in these remote learnings. In conjunction with that, there are a lot of related services like speech, like occupational therapy. My wife is a physical therapist with the Department of Education, working with kids with disabilities in their our pre-K program. So we now have made sure that they can get those physical therapy appointments. Really important. We really have to think about what the future of learning is going to be. In some instances, nothing's ever going to replace a teacher in a classroom. It's just not. But when there are times where a kid cannot get to school for some reason, we understand now that we have options, and then we could use this remote learning, be able to get the people that actually need it to them if they don't have the means to do it. So that's what we're doing on the remote learning side. And we've certainly understand that there are new barriers that we've discovered. One of them is voting from home. One of them is working from home and voting. We are not in a digital platform here that people can just go on an app or go onto a computer and be able to vote. So we have mail-in ballots. And now we have an election coming up, both locally and a general election in November. But right now, in our local voting coming up, or elections coming up, excuse me, we have to ensure that the ballots are accessible, because people with visual disabilities don't have access to Braille ballots. And we have to ensure that this barrier is tackled. And we're working with our Democracy NYC team here in New York City to work with the Board of Elections to ensure that we can get the proper mailing for people with disabilities. And then what does the digital age look like? And we're certainly thinking about that. Virtual participation is the new normal. We have to ensure that the virtual participation continues after the pandemic, ensure that people with disabilities have access to the internet, like we're doing with the Department of Education. We know a big part of people with disabilities searching for jobs are not having that technology. We have to make sure that happens. We have to have access to the smart devices, computers, assistive technology, ensure that employment and education continues to allow virtual participation. And one of the things that we know that we need to think about as we progress into the future, what all of this is ensuring that what is municipal Wi-Fi? How do we use our local telephone poles to ensure that people can get the free Wi-Fi and access that they need that's fast, efficient, and affordable? And that's what we're looking at post-COVID-19. I have a slide up here of something that we put out every year called Accessible NYC. It's the state of persons with disabilities in New York City. And it just generally pulls together everything that is happening in New York City, from our streetscape to our cultural institutions to healthcare. And now we're faced with this pandemic. And how do we move forward? How do we ensure that we're using some of the stuff that were mentioned earlier, like the AI for sign language? I'm really intrigued by that. How do we use those wearables within our streetscape? So we're coming up with a pretty aggressive post-COVID-19 report that's really going to drive the future of accessibility, both digitally and the physical landscape, because it's really important for the city of New York, which is the biggest city in America, to be able to think past this and be able to use technology to drive the future of our city. And we are committed here in New York City to do so. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. It's absolutely fascinating and quite humbling to see the huge amount of work that you're doing. Really, it is very impressive. So it's a fantastic, and I think the fact that you're planning beyond is exactly the right thing to do, because we need to plan to be inclusive going forwards, because if we're not planning now, the rebuilding of society, the rebuilding of how we operate and everything else is going to leave people behind, and we can't afford to do that. We've had too many decades of that. So and we've also shared your resources, the links that you mentioned online. So so thank you for that. It really is very impressive.
Yeah, as Neil said, I mean, those links are in the chat window as well that John Novick has posted, so that's fabulous, and we'll make sure, you know, that we get those out to other people. And we also had a comment in the Q&A from Darren Bates, and Darren has said, what I like so much about what Victor does is his commitment to incorporating people with cross disabilities into the development of public policy and urban planning processes. Thank you for your leadership, Victor, and I think we would all echo those sentiments.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we as societies need large conurbations to lead on some of this stuff. I do think that that we have an opportunity with what's happening right now to maybe look at things through a different lens, and I do think that we're going to have to replan our cities. We're going to have to do some significant infrastructure and urban planning that requires the changing of physical spaces, but also how we, rewire, and integrate technology into those physical spaces as well. So, so I think
absolutely agree with you, Neil. And we have a great team. I have two of my members on my team on the call right now, Jonathan Novick and Wale Sabri, and Wale is really a person that works out of our office across all city agencies to ensure websites are accessible, social media is accessible, looking at our streetscapes and the new technologies that are coming through there, really diving deep. And most of all, him and Jonathan are training people on all types of digital accessibility in every way, shape, or form that's out there. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. And again, thank you for allowing me to speak here today. And if there's any way that I can assist anyone, that's great. And I look forward to seeing what else you have happening today.